Oh. All right. It is another wonderful day in the neighborhood. It is Wednesday, June 16th, 2022. We have a great guest today. But before we get things going, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some musica.
I see trees of green, red roses too, and I see them bloom for me and for you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Brilliant, brilliant. John Butler, how are you, sir?
I am fine. As you know, there's a lot going on in the world, especially in the business world. I listened to the president. That was a great labor speech last night. He was up in his part of the country talking about where the country was. I thought it was very, very interesting. And then, of course, we have the war that is still going on. And of course, the stock market is going absolutely crazy. With the point scheme and going and sending interest rates back up, I looked at the stock market is really flying through the roof for the haves. The have-nots are still suffering from food shortages. And of course, if you look at the inflation, it is really, really here. But I think that Americans are stocked with money. Many Americans are stocked with money, and the price of gas is not really phasing them because they saved a lot of money, not a lot, but they saved more during the pandemic. So it's an interesting day. It's 102 in the great city of Austin, Texas. So I look forward to interacting today with Dwight and the chosen one, Llewellyn King.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Hello, Andres. Hello.
How are you? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We have a beautiful day here. It is very nice weather, about 78, I think. I, of course, am indoors because I have to be with you and Johnny, whereas otherwise I could be outdoors. But this sacrifice is small, considering, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a very difficult time for the whole world. We are facing catastrophic food shortages, particularly, they will be particularly devastating in Africa. The rich world will suffer shortages, but not starvation. The poor world will suffer starvation and will have huge efforts to move food, what food we can get. But the shortage of grains is going to be the terrible thing. Africa lives on corn, which they call maize. It is the staple diet, and it is in very short supply, as an awful lot of it came from Ukraine. Inflation is out of control pretty well. It's approaching 9%. That's very high indeed. It is not going to come down quickly. It's going to take some time before supply and demand come into balance and equilibrium is established with less consumption, more supply in everything. We are going to use less gasoline because it's too expensive, although I take Johnny's point, and that is there is no immediate evidence that these things are biting. The restaurants are full, the cars are on the roads. There is no evidence that anyone has yet been forced to cut back. And yet for people on low fixed incomes or low earners, it must be very difficult, especially if they have families. Another difficulty that affects that same part of the society is the lack of care for children. Child care was badly damaged during the pandemic. The mom and pop childcare operations, mostly mothers who took in other children, went out of business. Now people can't go to work, not because there's not a crying need for labor, but because they don't have anywhere to leave their children. It's a time of huge adjustment, a great time of reset, and it's not going to be comfortable or easy. And there are no quick fixes, and there is no political fix in the short term.
Yeah, well said. Well, we have a great guest today. Let me say hello to Dwight Smith. Dwight, how are you, sir?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. For those listening that don't know you, let me introduce you formally, briefly. Dwight is the founder and chief visionary officer at Paragon VTOL Aerospace, and he's going to be with us for the hour. So we're looking forward to learning all kinds of things flight-wise, and maybe even more, giving his background. Prior to Paragon VTOL, Dwight invented the patented diversion chemicals used today to enhance the recovery rate of oil and gas chemicals known as perforation methods, with other patents pending, along with inventing the collapsible 4-cup beverage carrier used nationwide by Church's Chicken, Popeyes, Chicago Bears Stadium, and many other retail and sports venues. Dwight has licensed his patents with multi-billion-dollar valuation of oil and services, many other to several companies in the early 2018. He can educate us in detail about some of these things. He's definitely an inventor, a visionary, and he now has decided that he wants to change transportation. He started his career at Purdue University as a chemistry pre-med student, eventually switched to marine biology. Interesting, broad background of learning about nature and from nature and inventing new things. And so, Dwight, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dwight, tell us real quick for the audience, Paragon VTOL Aerospace. What does that all mean? What does VTOL mean? Educate us.
Well, Paragon VTOL Aerospace is a baby of mine. I've been in aviation since I was 7 years old. So I built my first glider aircraft and successfully flew it around the neighborhood by strapping my friend on board and tossing him off the top of the roof of the house while growing up in Kingston, Jamaica. When I came to the United States, I continued aviation. I flew airplanes in high school, single prop, dual prop aircraft, and never stopped loving the aviation sector. What Paragon is the continuity, or is the evolution of my desire, my passion in aviation, to the point where if you look at drone technology, with the advent of drones, a lot of entrepreneurs have seen a window of opportunity in this sector to scale up, hopefully to, all things being equal, which they're usually not when you scale up from a small to a full-size version, but it's a way to transform the transportation in this fourth industrial revolution. So in order to make that happen, we have to take a step back. When I first started the company several years back, I thought we were just building an aircraft. I didn't realize we'd be building a sustainable ecosystem, infrastructure ecosystem to support it. That's one of the things that I think everyone gets so excited about, is the shiny object in the room, but not realizing a smart city or a smart infrastructure platform is absolutely essential, vertically or prior to make sure that the opportunity is viable. And so in order to do that, Paragon has bifurcated, or in some ways has split up in more ways than I imagined, into creating different companies to support the VTOL sector. Our VTOLs are vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. We thought that we were going to go purely with an electric powered aircraft in the beginning. And as you do your research, because everything is research until you're commercialized, we learned that battery technology is just not there yet. It still has a way to go. It's quite heavy. You have a payload factor, and with the VTOL sector, every ounce counts. So our company is designing a 4 to 8 passenger VTOL with 1 or 2 pilots inside. But we use a combination of battery technology and fuel, different versions of bioethanol or jet fuel, or to eventually move towards a hydrogen-based system. But in order for hydrogen to be viable and commercially scalable to the point where it makes sense financially, you have to have a hydrogen infrastructure. So that leads to another challenge. And so we've been kind of chipping away at this deal. Paragon partnered up with Rolls-Royce and SNC Electric, and working on some partnerships with some major energy companies to create a smart grid infrastructure where our vertiports are located to support not only our aircraft technology, but purely electric aircraft. So some of those have shorter hops. You look at the average distances between vertiport locations. My understanding, based on my industry knowledge, is on average between 20 to 50 miles. So think about the Nissan Leaf, right? When Tesla came up with their incredible automobile, the big five automotive players decided to compete before that thing even got really ingrained in our culture. And they came out with the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Volt. The challenge is the infrastructure wasn't there to support the Leaf. So you could only drive so far and turn around and go back home. And so the Tesla had the foresight to build an infrastructure to support their vehicle.
Right.
And at the same time, they took a more of a conservative approach while building that infrastructure, show off a shiny object, if you will, in the Roadster, but that never really caught on, while at the same time developing a really important automotive solution.
Right.
So that's what Paragon is doing right now. We can get into the detail in the course of this hour, but I just want to give you an overview that we're more than a VTOL company. We're actually the Paragon universe, and Paragon VTOL Aerospace is one segment within our entire ecosystem.
Yeah. Real quick, Dwight, I know that this ecosystem conversation touches a lot of things: air rights, traffic, other, sort of ecosystems, the air, the sort of commercial aviation and all these things. And how do you find the combination or the intersection of this, ecosystem, from transportation on the ground and where the car guys and the autonomous guys and the VTOLs? Is that a dialogue that is happening more and more, or what's your take on where is the evolution of those crossover dialogues?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And being the self-described werewolf of this industry, I'm like, on one hand, I'm in the environmentally friendly side, and on the other side, I'm still an oil man. I'm a first generation oil man. I created the diversion chemicals to divert your oil and gas in hydraulic fracturing, commonly known as fracking. And that's an important part of the ecosystem that I think people misunderstand. It's not going away. And as much as we'd like to think it is, it's just not. We need oil and gas, but we can have a very healthy conversation when the time is right on what that looks like. But by and large, most of the things that we use today, from consumer goods to our energy, et cetera, is powered by or used to create those products, whether it be your dashboard, your tire, the light that powers, that gives us the ability to see each other. We're still using that. So that being said, the transportation sector in and of itself, I look at it as there are two different solutions. And this is where Paragon we created a division called the NV Motor Group, called Neighborhood Vehicle Motor Group. And so the NV1 is actually being tested right now in college and university campuses, as well as being put into Virginia Union's campus this fall, and other areas in the city of Brownsville and locations in between. And what that is a neighborhood vehicle designed strictly, when your cell phone says avoid tollways and highways, this would be that solution. One of the things that I looked at during the pandemic is that there are over 11,000 neighborhoods in the United States, over 11,000.
Right.
In those neighborhoods, you have over 300 million people moving around. And then you have highways, which are designed to get folks over long stretches to get to work if they commute a longer distance and so forth. But neighborhood travel has been something that I've been doing forever that drives my family crazy, because I like driving down the neighborhoods. Sometimes the speed limit is 25, sometimes it's 35, sometimes it's up to 50 miles an hour here in Southern California. And so we designed a vehicle strictly for neighborhood travel using electric power. It has about a 90-mile range, crash and safety tested over 55 miles an hour, doors, handles, the whole entire deal, air conditioned, heated, and uses our technology to de-ice the exterior in the event that it's cold outside, but it keeps it warm in the inside using nanotechnology. And it can also warm the battery in the electric car. With my daughter's electric vehicle, she owns a Tesla. One of the challenges, if you leave it outside in cold weather for too long, you get that note, the battery's starting to drain out. And that's not just Tesla, that's all the other EV companies combined. So Paragon has been developing our technology for our VTOL, but we're actually testing it on our electric vehicle through the ENVI.
Got it.
Long-term, our goal is to create this ecosystem to avoid highways and tollways. My vision for the future is that highways and tollways are going to be, by and large, used by semi-trucks, first responders, autonomous vehicles, and the occasional driver that wants to drive. And currently, the vision that I've seen so far laid out is build more highways and build more tollways. And that site pollution can be somewhat nauseating if you live in a really nice area or not, and you just have to look out your window and see more and more highways going up. One of the areas that we operate out of is Houston, Texas, over 10 highways. I mean, and now, I'm being told by the EV manufacturers and so forth, they want more highways so they can sell more cars. And I think that is going to be tough when you have the average person. Most people on the highways are single passenger, which is why a lot of these carpool lanes, they're like the Autobahn, because most of the time they're open for business. So I believe that in order for the VTOLs to be efficient, cars have to be integrated in some capacity. It have some consideration has to be made in terms of how this system will come into play. The VTOL sector doesn't explain when you go from one vertiport to another vertiport, what happens. They tell you can use Uber, Lyft, you can some kind of rideshare company, you can use a rental car company, you call your friend to pick you up, get a taxi. Well, those things, that's not a really good value proposition, because at the end of the day, that can be quite expensive. And so I think we have to address those concerns as time goes on, and Paragon is working on solutions to be able to accomplish that.
Got it.
Yeah, right. Very, very, very interesting business models. I myself have been working with flightcorporation.com, which is FlightX. It's called FlightX Corporation. It's out of UT Austin. And of course, you hit your business model right on the head. Right before the pandemic, I went up to Austin. I went to Dallas, north of Dallas, and they were talking about Uber flight that went beyond helicopters.
Yes.
It looks like to me you're a Navy man, and y'all like to fly those things that go fast. I'm an Army boy, and we had Huey helicopters. We can go up and down, unlike the Navy. So my question is this: what, in terms of your business model, how do you land, and how do you get the flight path, and where do you land for that ecosystem, and how long will it take? So I know at the University of Texas, they want to, outlay every building with the landing pad, right? For students to go back and forth. But my question is, as before cars start flying around like bumblebees, how do we get to the point of the air traffic controller, the idea of that the skies are very, very low or very, very crowded now? How do you think about that for your business model, especially for your investors? Are we talking 20 years? Are we talking 40 years? Are we talking 5 years?
That's an excellent question, and I'm glad somebody's asking that. One of the things that frustrated me, why I decided to come out of the shadows, we've been around for over 4 years, but we incorporated 3.5 years ago. And about a year ago, I showed up on the scene in Brownsville, Texas, and made an announcement. I selected Brownsville as my home for my manufacturing facility and my headquarters. And one of the things that, the main reason I did that was because there's been so much misleading or information or unanswered questions about our sector. With the landing surfaces, the industry is currently branding it as vertiports for a vertical airport system. VTOLs, by and large, are supposed to take off and land vertically without using a runway. Some are short takeoff and landing, meaning they have a shorter runway and they take off and land, and then others are traditional aircraft. In our industry, the surface area is something that I think is being very overlooked. A lot of people within this sector are saying that they have thousands of garage roof decks and they're going to just paint the helicopter surface area and that's your vertiport solution. Case solved. That's the easiest part. And then we're just gonna, I've heard even at a conference I spoke at in last December, Future Travel Expo for the the airline and airport execs. And someone, and I won't say the name, but a major airline and a major VTOL company agreed that it's a great idea to fly behind the jet stream of an aircraft when it's taking off and landing with a VTOL. Mm-hmm. And you know, the craziness is on level 10 right now. Then the vertiport surface came up as in terms of how do you land these aircraft. And a person was, a major company was asked a question, and their answer was you have to build a pipe in the ground, and then the pipe has to be a certain width, and then you run water in the building, and then you have to make sure that people are happy with it. And that was the entire answer, the end. And everyone cheered. What you'll get from me is you'll get a straight answer. So but you'll also get an education around it. So your question that you just asked, I think it's important to utilize not just roof decks, but also open surface areas on the ground. Actually, I'm actually afraid of heights. I'm building these aircraft, but I'm afraid of heights. How does that work? Most engineers don't even fly what they build anyway, but I will actually fly in my aircraft. I don't want to be on a 20-story building and get out of a helicopter. Not everybody has a stomach for that. And so I look at something maybe 3, 4, 5 floors up. Maybe if you do equip a garage deck or a building with a vertiport surface area, you have to have special considerations in place, in my opinion. If you've ever seen an electric car when it catches on fire, what the fire department tells you is you wait for the fire to burn out. That's the solution. Mm-hmm. So if you have a roof deck or a garage, so to speak, for starters, and you've got all these internal combustion engines nearby, and you land one of these things and this thing is coming in hot, if you don't have systems in place on that vertiport surface area to address this from the onset, mm-hmm. I think we have a recipe for disaster. Think of this. If people have seen the movie Top Gun Maverick, or they know about aircraft carriers, mm-hmm. you'll never see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 aircraft landing at the same time on a carrier surface area. Mm-hmm. But in my sector, they're saying we're going to be able to do this like driving cars. Mm-hmm. That all comes down to your infrastructure on the vertiport surface area and also your air traffic management software system. Currently, the FAA has been inquiring about how to improve or basically build a new air traffic management software system. We have ADS-B in, and now we have ADS-B out. Those are now using on traditional airlines to be able to let you know in space where everything is located. And now it's now mandatory for most aircraft to have it. VTOLs have to incorporate a technology similar to this, but we have an industry that already has a shortage of air traffic controllers. So that has to be factored in as well when you're talking about air traffic management software system. What Paragon has done, my company through our Infralink software division, is we're building an IoT over blockchain software system to let you know where things are in space and also autonomous vehicles on the ground, to be able to provide a system that has an override feature where it requires as many steps as a mining of a cryptocurrency would be to confirm or validate the ledger before you approve it. I think that's really important. When you think about, I'll use Bitcoin as an example because most people, it's an IoT over blockchain system. So I use Bitcoin as an example in terms of what's popular to most people when they think of blockchain. Bitcoin has an average about 3 transactions per second. If we're talking using it for file storage, data management, et cetera, this is how I'm gonna approach it from that standpoint. Our system can handle over 8 to 10,000 transactions per second. So if you look at the amount of vehicles on the road or aircraft in the sky, that can be very valuable information. When you think about the energy usage, Bitcoin or Ethereum is somewhere between 110 for Ethereum and 840 kilowatts of energy per transaction to make that happen. Our system is 0.007 kilowatts of energy per transaction. So from an environmentally friendly standpoint, that's really important.
So what I hear, Dwight, is the science is there, right?
Yes.
The question is, how do you commercialize the science? How do you go from
Data.
where we are now? I'll let Llewellyn. Llewellyn is also a pilot, so he can speak probably with more authority than I can.
Oh, and this is totally fascinating to me, and I'm so glad you're approaching the air traffic control system, which seems to me to be the largest impediment. However, I wonder, excuse me, I wonder if there is some way that you can edge into a market. Aviation got a huge start from the post office, carrying mails. It was a job that needed to be done, and aviation came along and did it. And of course, it was hugely successful, and it essentially subsidized early aviation. I wonder if there's a way of edging into the VTOL world rather than it sort of appearing full blown. You go and buy one. First of which is people who are not pilots are not going to be able to deal with the multiple access in the air. They're going to be just totally terrified. They don't understand that. What the Wright brothers gave us was multi-dimensional control. You're still going to have it, and you're still going to have to be able to manage it if you're going to fly one of these things. So I wonder if there isn't a test bed of usefulness where you could go and sell a product and allow it to evolve, to make its mistakes and to find its equilibrium and its marketplace.
Yeah, I believe that's really important. And that all comes down to data. How much data can you provide? How much have you pushed it?
Well, it's not really, I'm not really asking about data, I'm asking about mission.
Okay.
What is the mission of a VTOL besides that we would very much like to have the convenience of it? But convenience is seldom a driving mission. Okay. Usually there's another purpose, and convenience is a function of that. But at least that's my view of how things are developed.
Okay. So at Paragon, we have a crawl, walk, and run approach.
Yeah, that's right.
And in our crawl phase, the way we're approaching it is strictly just starting off by, it's all data driven. So you start off with testing the aircraft in restricted, in areas that enable us to test it. So we have a 30,000 acre test site in Texas to test our technology along the US southern border. Coming out of that, the next phase would be is to test it moving cargo. I think cargo is an industry-driven opportunity, similar to what you just described, because with cargo, you don't have to have cheeks to seats, as they say in the military, or souls on board. You can just do it unmanned and get a lot of information data, while at the same time performing a function to get more transparency. And then after that, our next goal would be is to take our aircraft and use it for certain missions. Here in Southern California, we have wildfire season that seems to be rapid and almost year round. So our VTOL is designed to carry over 2,000 pounds of cargo. So we're able to put enough liquid inside from the red powder called FastCheck, and we can utilize that. We are actually working on developing a system or program for that, so we can use it to reduce the amount of wildfires in California to try to help to provide a solution. And while you're doing this and you scale into passenger, how do you get there? Ambulatory services, medevac. You start to move in that direction.
Very interesting. As a follow-up question, what are the chances of a leapfrog technology? We've always seen what I call leapfrog. Obviously, we went from legs to wheels. We went from the ground to the air. We went from copper wire phones to wireless phones. We went from reciprocating engines to rotating engines, to jet engines, to pure jets. Is there a chance that there will be a leapfrog that will make all of this much easier, and the sort of exponential growth we're expecting in known technology falls away because is there anything that hints at a different way of going technologically?
Yes, I've actually seen things that have been touted out there using plasma on the surface area to help you with some of the noise and the lift. The problem is the amount of power consumption you would need to do that. We actually explored that as an option and determined that in this atmosphere, it doesn't make sense for our company at this time. I've seen different types of, these solid state battery systems as another solution, but I have yet to see that commercialized, and that would really impact our industry. And there have been other things out there, but at this point in time, with confidence, I can't make any recommendations because I don't know of any that I think would be most likely a game changer. I haven't seen that yet.
So,
Thank you. Very interesting.
Let me ask you this, Dwight. We have drones now, and the military, of course, has drones with people. And the military has drones without people. So as you move into the drone industry, what would be the advantage? Because it looks like to me the military and NASA is trying to move away from people being inside of the drone to make the drone itself operational to get the duty done. So as Llewellyn said, are you going to, what would be your target market? Is it going to be going after the firefighters? Would it be the firefighters? Will the military have a space forward on their bases as they move around the base? We will have a space forward in foreign countries as we move around foreign countries on base. So as you develop your technology, what is your basic market? What are you targeting? Is it B2B? Do you want to sell me one? You want to sell a military one? You want to sell the firefighters one? You want to sell the male people one? What's your target for this flying bumblebee in the sky?
Yeah. Our company's business model is mobility as a service. That's what we're targeting. So it would be all in one closed loop environment. But when you mentioned the military, it sparked my interest. My father was part of the founding team that created Jamaica's military, known today as Jamaica Defense Force. And so I grew up on a base. I've always been engaged. It was he trained under the British Royal Guard. And so it was today it still is very revered. When I think about our military, I think about our aircraft. Our aircraft is somewhat different, and somewhat it is a game changer. Our VTOL is designed to land on land, water, sand, or snow. Our nanotechnology is about 6 times as strong as steel. And so when you incorporate that to de-ice the surface area of the aircraft, it also provides an extra added benefit when you're talking about the desert areas with sand, because sand shreds a lot of the propellers for the military aircraft. That has been a problem that's plagued them for years. In terms of the manned versus the unmanned scenario, I think the military is smart in moving towards more of in unmanned in some applications, but for recon and recoil missions, I think having a tandem VTOL like what we offer would be excellent for removing troops wounded in the battlefield, but at the same time providing the ability to provide that added layer of protection in the system.
Yeah, because when I get on an American airline, I call the pilot a passenger.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he's touching the plane. What I think is very, very interesting. I have seen many kind of business models like this. And I like the idea of maybe starting in the rural. I like the idea of maybe starting, yes, on college campuses. I like enclosed things where it can be tested. Mm-hmm. And it's like your Tesla, which I call a great golf cart. You described earlier. I thought you were describing my golf cart when you described your daughter's
Yes.
mobility. So I think that thinking through the business model, there will be many, many applications because we move a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We move stuff in the city, between the city.
Okay. So here's where I'd love to, if I may. So studied marine biology at Purdue, been in aquatic as well my entire life. I used to have 35 aquarium in my parents' basement because I love to separate my cichlids from the African cichlids from Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, et cetera, my South American cichlids, and then my marine organisms. When I went to UT Austin, one of the mission that I challenged them for is our cargo delivery drone for small packages. Because if you can develop an air traffic management software system for that and continue to build off of that, it helps you get a lot more data and a lot more more difficult operations. Cleaning an aquarium that's 5 gallons in a saltwater or 10-gallon nano tank is a lot more difficult than a 100-gallon aquarium because there is so little room for error. And so when you take a small delivery drone and you deliver it between campuses or between dormitories and you're working out your bugs and kinks, it enables you to have the understanding to scale up to the larger versions, if you will.
I understand the fish. I was the first investor in glowfish. I did glowfish. But let me ask you this. I mean, when you look at the movement, I still need, all right, for example, Willie Nelson now talks about it's a ground thing that delivers, right? It's a robot, a great commercial on television that delivers everything on the ground. Okay, so, and then of course there's no people. My question is, there are lots of competition, but as you sit in your strategy group, I mean, are you going to say that we're going to go start the experiment with the mail? A great suggestion. I mean, and it could be inner city mail from one area to another. Will it be what you suggested? The other kind of things that we moved. What about the rural areas? But I was just wondering, how are you envisioning the paychecks coming in, the business model?
Sure. So
to the military, right?
So we are doing the mail at Virginia Union University on campus. So we'll do the mail, and we'll with our VTOLs, our small drones, as well as with our ENVI, our electric vehicles on campus. So we're working on establishing that entire ecosystem, both there and in Brownsville, Texas this year. So everything I've described, you will see the entire scale up system, the whole system in operation before year end in both locations.
Yeah, Sean, that's why I met you. I'm on the member of the MIDI Foundation. I met you in Brownsville.
Yes, that's right.
Oh yeah, we toured your place at Brownsville, and Andre and I are doing work there. Well, it sounds very, very interesting. Llewellyn King has seen so much in his lifetime. And I was wondering, Andrea, Llewellyn, how long would this take?
How long would what take?
Dwight's application to change everything so we can have...
Well, that's always a very interesting question. I tend to think that most technology takes 40 years from the point of proof to the point of the full deployment. That's about what it took for air conditioning. It's about what it took for electricity. It's about how fast fracking brought advanced fracking, because it's really very old, but Dwight knows this, brought us oil and gas in abundance. A lot of the things we worked on in the energy crisis, solar panels, windmills, it took 40 years for them to be effectively deployed, perfected and deployed. So I don't think this is going to come overnight, but I think they're going to be market penetrations, and Dwight is doing it the right way, looking for markets that can be penetrated. The mail is a great idea, except the mail is dying. We aren't getting as many. It was perfect scheme for first-class letters when we had a lot of first-class letters, but they're rather dying out. But I think it has huge application for light deliveries, essential deliveries, and schedulable deliveries. Because if they're scheduled, you overcome some of the air traffic problems, because at 8 a.m. X is going to happen, at 9 a.m. Y is going to happen, rather than everything happening simultaneously. And air traffic control and the data systems to control it are going to be, in my view, absolutely vital, probably more important than any other aspect of this. The old, popular mechanics idea that everybody would have a flying car, I don't think that's ever going to happen or desirable, but that we could have services delivered to our residences and places of work, I think it's entirely feasible and will happen. I also think you need to go after the main chance. Don't try to develop the whole thing. The Wright brothers didn't try to develop high tensile alloys, radar, radio. They developed an aircraft or a concept for an aircraft, really. And
they assemble an aircraft.
The collateral, sorry, what did you say, Andre?
They assemble an aircraft.
Yeah, that's true. But the collateral developments you need to leave to someone else. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll bog down with developing collaterals and you'll forget the central purpose and nothing will happen.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious about the progress of the conversations, because it seems to me that it is a commercial service that gets authorized first, where all the parties, and I would suspect, Dwight, and you tell me what is the status of this, but that cities and whoever owns the rights of the air below the 30,000 foot level for federal aviation, that airspace needs to be franchised for services, and people will have to apply for a franchise to fly whatever, the mail or deliver pizza, or how is that coming along? What's your insights on what can you share?
So this is an area that has been very disjointed right now. They're still trying to find their way, sort their way through it. I would equate it to fish swimming in a stream. You have to have a system that that there are certain requirements in place, certain mandates that you have to have addressed. So, for example, with all VTOLs, we need to know the truth behind how fast they can actually fly and what their cruising speed is. In order for you to determine if it's going to even work in the same airspace, they should follow each other in a stream. If you have aircraft just flying ad hoc anywhere they want, that can present a logistical nightmare in the skies. Right. One of the beauty of having highways and byways and roads is there's some uniformity, and it enables you to have a better system to create stoplights and street lights and stop signs, et cetera, to be able to make that thing a doable deal. Also want to say that in order for what I've described so far to become a reality, we're talking it's going to be a process. This is not an immediate, just because we can build the technology doesn't mean that the FAA and other agencies are going to buy in immediately. It's going to require a lot of heavy lifting. And as Llewellyn described, it takes a time for the whole system to mature. Electric cars were not just created in 2012. They've been around for some time. It's just, it was a function of the maturity of the process, the acceptability, and also government stakeholders saying, we're going to invest in a company's technology to allow you to not only fund it, but also fund the infrastructure to support it. And that was a big gamble, and it paid off for some. I just think that there has to be a scale up period. You have to manage the expectations, and you have to have transparency. One of the things I like about our industry, the tech sector, is by and large, people have video open houses or actual open houses where you get to go by their facility and they give you a tour of how the thing works. That leads to public buy-in.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the idea of having a person buy their own VTOL, it's suicide mission. It's a suicide mission. I don't even trust myself driving a car. I mean, literally, I shouldn't say that, but I haven't had a speeding ticket, knock on wood, never been pulled over for anything my entire life because I drive the speed limit.
Yeah.
I'm a horrible parker. I don't know what it is. I can't park in one lane. It's the most difficult thing. I have to take my time to back up and get in there. And I can only imagine when someone gets in one of these VTOLs and starts showing off what that would look like. So I believe having a piloted aircraft is probably going to be one of these lower hanging fruits to get some public acceptance. Bear in mind that VTOL technology is not brand new. It's been around since late 50s, early 60s with the helicopter.
Yeah.
And so we're due for a maturation checkpoint right now, but we're now in the phase of the multi-rotor scenario with these VTOLs, because a lot will have four rotors or 5 or 6 or God knows how many. The other issue we have to address is noise. If we're talking about having a lot of VTOLs in a certain airspace or small delivery drones for a light package, public acceptance once again comes into play. If it's too loud, that noise pollution becomes a problem, and it's a complete turnoff. Yeah. And so the FAA recently is offering up some guidance that they'd like to have the VTOL, the decibels around 55 or so decibels or less. And companies are working on ways to address that. And, you know, it's I think it's very achievable. Our conversation is about 55 decibels or so. Right. So, I mean, I think it's very achievable. It's just where I have concerns is just the distance, because with battery technology, when the battery goes, I've been in the car where I've got 120 miles and I'm just rocking on the highway. Yeah. And all of a sudden, but I'm speeding. I'm going like on the highway now. And normally I don't speed, but my daughter's car begs you to speed. Yeah. So I'm going from 60 to 75. That's speeding for me. Yeah. And so I'm on the 75 on the highway. This thing says to me, the battery performance drops significantly. And it says, if you don't pull over in X amount of miles, you will run out of battery. And I could have sworn the thing just said 110 miles till it was empty. And so I had to find the nearest charging station. I had 15 miles till it was empty. And it said by the time I reached there, I'd have about 1% battery power. Wow. Now there is reserve, and I learned later on there's reserve backup, but I got there because I was driving now at 35 miles an hour on the highway close to the curve, because I wanted to save as much battery as I could. Sure. And I think when we're talking aircraft, VTOLs in the skies, it would take, based on a 4-passenger, 1-pilot configuration, about 8 times the amount of power density, amount of lift to get that aircraft moving versus an electric vehicle on the road. Right. So when people are saying that we can go 300 miles or so in a VTOL, all battery, I say, prove it. You know, right. It's one thing to fly an aircraft with no one inside or with 1 pilot or so inside and say you did 150 miles because you don't know how strong that thing is. But it's different when you have all the payload inside. It affects the performance rate of the technology, which Absolutely. Is why we use a hybrid system.
Absolutely. Let me take a moment. Let me pause, guys, real quick to remind our audience of our annual conference that Dwight had the opportunity to be a keynote speaker in 2021. It's coming up again. It's going to be in downtown Austin at the JW Marriott, if you've been there, on 2nd Street. It's a world-class venue. We're excited about it. We will have 18 keynotes and 9 panels, and we will have again a session on mobility, and here are the companies that had the opportunity to speak in keynote last year, and we're very excited about that. And want to remind you all about the work that we do at Texas State, and we have 3 mobility labs that we're working on getting built up, and hopefully at some point Paragon will take advantage of what we're doing there, especially because of the ecosystem of cities and enterprises that we have put together as members. And then I want to thank Texas State University for sponsoring our Digital Roundtable. So Dwight, tell us real quick, let's focus on 2022, 2023. What are the next 3 or 4 things that Paragon is working on? What's next?
Sure. We are working on displaying the ecosystem this year. We have I think it's important in our industry to have a really good relationship with a public to private partnership. Paragon has an incredible one with the city leaders in Brownsville, Texas, with the city manager, Noel Bernal, and deputy city manager, Helen Ramirez. They have been outstanding for supporting our mission, our initiatives, and providing the resources. What Paragon did there is we're developing, along with Virginia Union University, research and innovation centers to create job opportunities to help us build our system, future employees, if you will, but at the same time, they're great for working out the bugs and kinks and having a massive think tank. And we plan to expand that, obviously, to my alma mater, Purdue University, and others will be able to do that. So this year we're going to do our 2-passenger VTOL for law enforcement. These are all part of the whole scale-up process. This is more of a for border security, because we're on the border. So we're gonna display that, because we already have all of our motors built out. Everything we've done so far is all custom. We make our own electric motors, very powerful, propellers, airframe, etc. So we'll do that for law enforcement, for border agents, for first responders, to be able to test in our facility while we get some measurable data. And at the same time, we're actually building currently our half-size and our full-size airframe to be able to get that up and going before the end of the year and start testing that along with what we learn and kind of see where we're going to fit into that deal. At the same time, we've already begun selling our electric vehicles, and it's a great opportunity to buy one for neighborhood travel. If you look at the gas prices, it's a little bit beefy, if you will, to get around. So if you have a spare car in your garage, I suggest buying one of our Paragon NV1s, neighborhood vehicle serial number 1. I think is for less than 20 grand, you're in a great position to have an incredible automobile. And so we're going to use some of our technology from our VTOL aircraft inside of that vehicle as well. So you can expect to see some really big things coming out of Brownsville, Texas, and Virginia Union this fall. And I'll invite you to come out physically and see this in action, because I think you're going to find it to be a treat.
Absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful. Llewellyn, John?
Well, I just think that, the program, looking at all of these great things in the future, and I think this is what we are about, just looking at the great things in the future. And as I said to Dwight, I have seen lots of great stuff in this area. There's a lot of competition. And to be from Purdue University, I don't know if you know Sean Taylor. Do you know Sean?
No, I do not.
Well, Sean just went on the Board of Regents there. He's a great friend of mine. I'll send you his contact information. Super. But I think that you have a bright future. And one thing about technology, nobody saw the cell phone coming. Nobody saw the light coming.
That's right.
And I can tell you this, nobody sees, especially people flying around like bumblebees and packages flying around like bumblebees. So it's good to meet you, and I'll see you in email.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I think that that you're in a very exciting position. I can't imagine anything more exciting. One of the great joys of the time we live in is mobility. If you were born 150 years ago, unless you were very wealthy, you never got more than about 100 miles from where you were born. And most people were born and lived and died within remarkably small radius. Now we travel the world, and personal daily mobility is part of the richness of our lives. Having an automobile, being able to take a car, even to get a bus is just a huge advantage in the human tradition. And I think you're absolutely in the right place. I've always thought about being a pilot, and I'm only a private pilot. I don't fly anymore anyway, I was a private pilot for quite a long time. Was that since time immemorial, human beings have wanted to fly, and a schmuck like me can do it. Wow. But I do think that there's a limit to personal flight because of all of the factors we know: safety, airspace, management. But I think there's very little limit to goods delivery, scheduled in a controlled way, huge advantage, clear out the highways in many, many ways. I think that's tremendous. And I'm inclined to think we will solve the landing problem, not with people's roofs and cars, but with dedicated spaces, we have dedicated spaces to park cars, dedicated spaces to catch trains. It's not a huge expectation that we can find space to allow vertical takeoff aircraft to land in cities conveniently. I think if you were landing on rooftops, you get more people falling off the roof than were ever killed in by the aviation accidents. And that's worth remembering you, Dwight, will remember how one of the big safety issues was not flying the airplane, but not walking to a propeller on the ground. When you thought, oh, well, that's over, I've done that. And then you got minced by somebody's prop. So these are going to be the kinds of challenges, but it really is the most exciting place in technology that I can think of, and you're bang in the middle of it. And I think that's absolutely exceptional and extraordinary, and you're very lucky.
Absolutely. I would concur with that tremendously. We believe at Texas State in the work that we do at CMG that mobility as a service is the ultimate mega trend that will transform everything in the next 50 years. And it requires broadband, it requires a new power grid, it requires new software systems with AI and blockchain. It requires new thinking about how we organize society in general. It would probably have a great benefit. The single most important benefit that we are predicting, many people are predicting with mobility as a service, is the elimination of parking. No more parking, no more parking lots. They're gone, because people should, instead of owning a device, a flight vehicle, they should just be members of a club. And whatever device they need shows up for whatever function they need. And these devices are, highly more effective, fly, in an asset utilization manner that is rival the things like the power grid itself, which are very efficient. Unlike today, where you drive a car for 2 hours and it sits 20 hours in the parking lot, right? So I think mobility as a service, it's going to be phenomenal, and seems to be like Dwight will find a way to get 1,000 patents out of that and make some money.
I would just add very quickly that mobility is part of the freedom construct. Yes. The more mobile you are, the freer you are.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Paragon has a 100-year business plan, just for the record. So I won't be here to see it all come to fruition, but we have a very large vision, and we have a very methodical and systematic, slow expectation, so we can build into that.
Fantastic.
Well, we look forward to staying in touch, yes. Dwight. Now we'll circle back to make the case for Texas State University being one of your partners in delivering the future.
Yes.
And thank you for being with us. We'll circle back also about Digital 360 2022.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you all for having me.
Oh, it's been a great delight, really has.
It's been wonderful. I like thinking about the future and thinking about the future.
Yes, thank you.
John Butler, take us away.
Riding on the city of New Orleans, Illinois Central, Monday morning rail. 14 cars and 14 restless passengers, 3 conductors and 25 sacks of mail. And all along this southbound Odyssey, the train pulls out of Kankakee and rides through plains, plains and fields.
Excellent.
Bravo, bravo.
That's a little transportation for you.